Spacious skies for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesty above the fruited plain.
Good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. A copy of the Open Meetings Act is located on the north wall of the legislative chambers, and an automatic external defibrillator is available on the back wall of the legislative chambers. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We will begin with the agenda for the Douglas County Board of Equalization. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Boyle, Commissioner Kavanaugh, Commissioner Duda, Commissioner Kraft, Commissioner Morgan, Commissioner Rogers, Madam Chair.
Here, and please note that Commissioner Rogers is off on business and has asked to be excused from today's meeting. Item A, approval of the minutes of the Board of Equalization meeting held Tuesday, March 31st, 2015, and item B, call for a meeting and set Tuesday, April 21st, 2015, as a date for hearing on certified assessment corrections reflecting the addition of omitted property to the tax rolls or increased value on property. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve. Second.
Any questions or comments? Please vote. Citizen comments. Is there anyone in the chamber wishing to speak to the Board of Equalization about an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to resolutions. There are 3 resolutions before us. Is there a motion to approve?
So move. Second.
Does that include adjournment?
Yes, it does. Yes.
Any questions or comments? Please vote.
Motion passes.
We'll move to the agenda for the Douglas County Board of Corrections. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Boyle,
Here.
Commissioner Kavanaugh, Commissioner Duda, Commissioner Kraft, Commissioner Morgan, Commissioner Rogers, Madam Chair.
Present. Item 1, approval of the minutes of the Board of Corrections meeting held Tuesday, March 10th, 2015. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Any questions or comments? Please vote.
Motion passes.
Citizen comments. Is there anyone wishing to speak to the Board of Corrections about an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to the report from the Department Director, Dr. Mark Foxall.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Morning.
Yeah, before you, my March Board of Corrections report. Enclosure number 1, calling that to your attention. 9 months into the fiscal year, we are under budget at this time. Calling to your attention enclosure number 2, community corrections and in-house programs. Community corrections, in particular, collaborate. I've spoken to you in the past about that. The web-based reentry case management system is operational and initial reporting functions are in use. Through funding from Region 6, Community Mental Health Center began providing chemical dependency evaluations at our facility in February, so that program is going along fairly well. Since the inception of this program, 14 CD evaluations have been completed, so we're very thankful for that partnership with the CMHC and Region 6. 24/7 alcohol sobriety program. The 14 new participants were added to the 24/7 program, conducted 2,941 breath tests in February, and overall compliance for this program is approximately 99.5%. In particular, 17 individuals were monitored by SCRAM for a combined total of 424 days of monitoring during the period. The overall SCRAM compliance rate was 99.2%. Our work release
Dr. Foxall, if I can get my mic on. A quick question. What happens on the 24/7 sobriety program? The 2 no-shows and the tests that came back, the 12 positive breath tests, what happens to those people?
There are different sanctions in place for individuals who are non-compliant with the program. I'll let Mike Myers, the Community Corrections Manager, walk you through those details.
Thank you. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mike Myers, Community Corrections Manager for the Department of Corrections. Alcohol violations, whether they are on breath testing or on scram, the first offense is 12 hours in jail. The second offense is 24 hours in jail. Third and subsequent offenses, the individuals are detained in jail until they explain their actions to the judge, and the judge can decide then what to do with their future participation on the program. No-shows are treated as equivalent to a third or subsequent offense. So it's actually more severe in a sanction to no-show for a test than to come in and test positive if it's your first or second violation.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that.
Commissioner Boyle?
Yes, well, we're on the subject. I was going to wait, but while we're on the subject, do we have a good cooperation from the judges in sending their people to this program, or do we have one judge that does real well and that's it? What's the story on that?
I would say it's overall it's improving. In the first 2 or 3 months, I think it was really kind of more of a matter of understanding the program and working out some lines of communication among all the various entities that had to work in concert to place somebody in the program. I think that our distribution among the judges is pretty uniform at this point. I'm not aware that there's any one judge that's putting a ton on and others that are not at all.
I would like to, if you could. It wouldn't become public necessarily, but it has to, I guess, if it's a document. But I'd like to see which judges are doing what. On the United Way committee that I serve on, we do know that there's one judge who's really supporting the whole program over there, and we can't seem to get it to spread. So I'd like to know if we need to do more education.
Absolutely, we can do that research.
Thanks. Thank you.
Commissioner Kraft?
Yes. Mike, on the 99.5 compliance rate, which sounds quite good, how does that compare to the organizations nationally that are using this program?
It's on par. And actually, to be honest, I think our numbers actually dipped a little bit this month. They were up closer to 100% in previous months. That takes into account the no-shows, the violations, any attempts to tamper with the scram equipment. All of those are counted as non-compliant events. But typically most programs have in the high 90s or 99% or above.
And have you been able to measure how many days or nights in jail we have saved?
Not as of yet. That's probably a good task for us to get into, to look at what bed days savings this program is providing. It may be difficult to say with certainty because there are some individuals that may have been able to bond out anyway without this program, but this was a condition that the judge added and to the condition of their release. But we can certainly probably try to get a reasonable estimate to the commissioners.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
As an aside to that, Commissioner Boyle and I were speaking before this meeting about a conference call I had this morning with a couple of universities about data and analyticals. So I know that's something that really drives my decision making. It really drives your decision making, and we're working on a plan, a model that is going to help us in that area. So we had an 8 o'clock conference call with that this morning. We've got a 12:30 meeting to speak to that again, and I think I'd like to have a Criminal Justice Committee meeting to kind of lay out what that plan is going to look like. So it's very timely question and conversation with the commissioners. Thank you. Work Release admitted 62 individuals during the previous month, and those individuals donated 1,303 hours of community service to various public and private charitable organizations. House arrest admitted 87 individuals during the month of March. 444 hours of community service were donated by these individuals. RAP program, or reentry assistance, admitted 23 individuals during the month of March. Corrections programs, 51 individuals were admitted to corrections programs in the jail. The practice, and this is a little update on GED, and we're slowly but steadily moving forward. Practice and official computer-based GED testing began in March under this new GED model. Several individuals passed official intermediate test and are progressing towards successful completion of the requirements to attain their GED. In fact, I believe there's one individual who's going to test today or tomorrow for their GED and should have completed that process and be a successful GED graduate. Pretrial services, 21 individuals were referred for priority prosecution, saving 179 bed days. 126 individuals were placed on pretrial release in March. 536 individuals were managed on the program with a 94% compliance rate. Enclosure number 3, compliance. We are currently reviewing bids for our PREA audit, which take place late summer, early fall. Enclosure number 4, personnel. More than 400 personnel were trained in motivational interviewing. Spoken about this in the past, and this training will be incorporated into pre-service and in-service training henceforth. Calling to your attention, enclosure number 6, a little bit about our population. For admits, 1,553. Releases, 1,558. Our ADP, or average daily population, 980. Marshal population increased. ICE population increased. Felony pretrial population increased. Misdemeanor pretrial population decreased, however. The female population increased. However, there's still 2 female housing units open today, but those numbers are continuing to increase, as a matter of fact. Enclosure number 7, with respect to medical, staff did 962 screenings for the month of March. H&Ps, or health and physicals, 433. Discharge referrals, an important component that we continue to watch, 298. And my discharge planner is here this morning if there are any questions for her. Mental health, enclosure number 8. Initial psych assessments are 51. Initial mental health assessments, 145. Mental health infirmary placements, 62. Referrals to community-based mental health services, outpatient psych, medication management for 7. Mental health and co-occurring disorder treatment programs are 125. Mental health therapy, 42. Long-term psych, 1. And I have incorporated charts in the subsequent pages, so you can take a look at those. I would say that Jared Osborne, our mental health director, has moved on, and we have an interim mental health director, and Ann Sales is here today in the back if you have any questions of her, but I just wanted to announce that transition since it's such an important piece of what we do at corrections in the mental health environment.
Okay, any questions? Commissioner Boyle?
Yes, I just wanted to mention that I have asked Dr. Foxall to tell us the number of people in his facility who are there for not paying fines and other kind of, I think, sentences that are not necessary that they be placed in our facility. And we're going to be getting that figure because we do have a lot of people who come through who have really done nothing. They can't afford to pay a fine, or they're there for not paying child support, which of course is serious, but what's the point putting them in jail? You know, that really doesn't help. So we're going to look at that and see if we can't make some change.
Said something I didn't understand.
That's okay.
That's mostly all the time.
You know, I have to admit, Claire Duda was talking about his phone this morning, and I was coming down here, and all at once my phone started talking to me. I had messages, and I thought, how did that happen? You know? So I made sure that it was shut off. So I know. They're wonderful, aren't they? In any event, we're going to get that information. It'll be useful. Not a problem.
Right. At some point, can we get the pyramid diagram?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. You can. I will, as soon as I get back to the office, I'll send it out to everybody and make sure the clerk has a copy too. I'm sorry. You should have loaded that up. But that's ready to go. As I told you, I held off on that. Make sure
just to make sure we had
the right numbers, and we're getting consistency in the data, and the data appears to be consistent. And I will send that out to you as soon as I get back to the office.
This,
yes.
What I'm asking him about is put together a pyramid that lays out what diagnoses there are with our individuals that we're housing that have mental illness and what those diagnoses are. And it's just a very easy way to understand what we're dealing with in terms of mental health. So thanks, appreciate that.
Yes, and we're also working on, we've got a UNO intern working on recidivism data. We've got good numbers for 12 months, so just crunching those numbers, and we're looking at some of the preliminary data last night, so it'll be interesting as well, and try to report that out for the May Board of Corrections report.
Great. Okay, any other questions or comments for Director Foxall? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved. Please vote. We'll move to the agenda for the Douglas County Board of Commissioners. Roll call, please. Present. Item 1A, approval of the minutes of the Board of Commissioners meeting held Tuesday, March 31st, 2015, and 1B, approval of claims submitted for payment processed through Tuesday, April 14, 2015. Any questions or comments? Please vote. Consent agenda, items A through P. Is there a motion to approve? Yes. Oh.
I do have a question that I'd like to ask on item B, whether or not we, Mr. Carlson?
Yep, he's here.
Okay. Morning, how are you?
Good. Eric Carlson, Douglas County Purchasing.
Yes, on the item number 1, laundry services for Douglas County Department of Corrections, we chose Cornhusker State Industries. Was this after the bid process?
Yes, it was.
Okay, well, that really is my question. I guess I gave you...
Yep, it was formally bid, and the department recommended that acceptance.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
You bet.
Okay. Commissioner Duda?
Thank you. I just briefly want to say that with the Barrett Holm invoice on here, that I appreciate their willingness to kind of compromise and meet us halfway, and the diligence of the staff that bring this back to us with a $9,300 savings. So just wanted to mention that.
All right.
Thank you.
Please vote. Oh, I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry. I read this awfully thoroughly last night, and I have some other questions.
Okay, that's fine.
Excuse me, on item number L, on the settlement of the litigation for this employee, is this going to be coming out of the department where she worked? I think at one time, Commissioner Rogers proposed a policy that that's what we do when there are cases like this. I'm not sure if this applies or not. I don't mean to spring this on Teresa, but can you tell us?
Teresa here at County Attorney's Office. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, Commissioner. Okay. I would have to look into it.
Maybe our finance guru would know. Joe, are we on item G on this payment of claim, or not G, excuse me?
L.
L, the settlement that we have with the former employee. She worked at the Department of Corrections. Is this money coming out of the Department of Corrections, or is it coming out of some other fund, if you know?
I wasn't that familiar with it. It's a tort claim, isn't it? No.
It's employment discrimination, and you're correct, Commissioner Boyle. Commissioner Rogers did sponsor a resolution that was approved some years ago that required payment of all employment discrimination settlement lawsuits or judgments to be paid out of the department that it originated in. We haven't specifically discussed this, but that it does appear that it would most likely have to come out of the corrections budget. I'll talk to Joe about it and to Dr. Foxall after the meeting.
That'll be fine. Thank you for looking into that. I appreciate it. And then finally, the other question that I have is with item P. I'm kind of curious where we have an agreement with ITT Educational Services. Mr. Tourville, is he here? Would you please?
Yes.
I'm sorry to do this.
No, that's fine.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jim Torville, Administrator, Douglas County Health Center.
Good morning. I'll try to be a little more respectful and give people warnings when
That's
I'm
fine.
doing this. I apologize to all of you. I'm curious on this affiliation agreement that we have with ITT Educational Services. Is this a for-profit educational company? Is that what this is? Do you know?
I don't know that, Commissioner.
Okay, well, I think...
This actually is an addendum to an existing contract that the Mental Health Center did have in place. It was a contract was approved by them, and then we just piggybacked off that so that the nursing students can actually do rotations at the health center and to learn clinical skills.
Well, I'll tell you what, rather than take time this morning, I'll contact you and talk to you about this and get my questions answered, and then see if I want to propose any changes.
Sounds good.
And I'll work with you on this. Thank you very much.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any others?
That's it, believe it or not.
Okay. Commissioner Kavanaugh?
I just have a quick question on item L that Commissioner Boyle was talking about before. Am I reading this right? We're settling this case pursuant to this item?
Yes. Teresa, York County Attorney, that is correct, Commissioner.
I'm sorry?
That is correct, Commissioner.
Okay. Then are we settling it for a dollar amount?
$19,500.
$19,500?
Pursuant to the resolution that's included in your book, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on the consent? There's been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Please vote.
Motion passes.
Next, we have a few recognition and proclamations, the first being declaring April 2015 as National County Government Month, and this year's theme is Counties Moving America Forward. The keys are transportation and infrastructure, and this is the theme chosen by the National NACO President. We have a few activities that are scheduled for here in Douglas County, and that is each department and office is creating a poster board of what their department or office does, and then we'll work with the building commission to display those on the Farnham level, I think is what Paul decided. And we are sending out and have been sending out the Did You Know facts. Those are on our Facebook page and other social media, and that is where each department is described in kind of 3 or 4 bullets of what they do. We did have an employee night at the Orpheum during the Motown presentation. I think there was about 85 people that attended, and everybody had a really good time. We are putting together a few more activities for the rest of the year, and we will talk about those a little bit later as soon as those are firm. But again, that is the resolution on county government awareness. The other resolutions are congratulating the Creighton Prep High School team for winning the men's basketball Class A state title. And I don't know if anyone is here from Creighton Prep.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Oh, as a Creighton Prep alum, I am proud to endorse this resolution and congratulate the Junior Jays men's basketball Class A champions.
And then we have
Commissioner Borgerson.
Oh, sorry, Commissioner Boyle.
I have to get my 2 cents in, too. This will just show the difference in age on the board, but I too, would congratulate Creighton Prep. I'll make a comment. I took the test and couldn't get in when I went to school, so I didn't go to prep. So that's why I don't wear any shoes at the board meeting when I have to count. But anyway, this is the difference in age. I have a grandson starting at prep, and I've had, this is my first one going through there. We've had a lot of Marion, but anyway, and Central High as well. But anyway, so I joined my fellow Irishmen over there in congratulating prep.
Okay. Next resolution is congratulating Elkhorn South High School on their 2015 men's basketball Class B state title. And then last is congratulating the Omaha Westside High School women's Class A for their state title.
Well, I'll add 2 cents for Elkhorn and West Side, but West Side, I have a whole slew of grandkids going there, too, so. Anyway, congratulations. This is really terrific to see these schools do this.
Absolutely.
It's really wonderful.
Yes.
And I want to also add a little comment about the, it shouldn't be a little comment, but the Winnebago school that pulled that off. That was, I mean, that was really incredible, and it's just wonderful to see the kind of stamina. I love that coach coming back from when he was told some things that shouldn't have been said to a young man, and he decided he was going to come back and kind of put it in their face, and he did. And it's not that he did that, but it's just that the stamina and the courage and the drive, and then to have the success is just incredible. So congratulations to them, too.
Commissioner Boyle, we can have, there'll be a couple more resolutions next week if you want to add that one.
I'd like
to
to,
that.
yeah,
Okay.
really
All
would.
right, we'll do that. Very good. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Please vote.
We all seconded.
I was at the St. Augustine.
1 moment, please.
Oh, really? When was that? In Omaha? Here? Oh, I didn't know that.
Okay.
Who put that on?
Mine working?
Let go and then do it again. Nope, it still didn't beep. Nope, it's not lighting up.
Somebody's more high-tech than I am.
I know. That technician from Chicago fixed it.
That's right. Commissioner Kavanaugh won't be voting anymore today.
Okay. Are you voting yes?
I'm voting yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Duda, I'd rather if his mic didn't work than his voice.
Okay, next are presentations. We have one from MAPPA regarding the regional vision of Heartland 250. And we have held this over a number of times, and I do want to say I appreciate your willingness to meet with our citizens that had concerns about this. And so I'll give it to you to, after this, we can take action today if we so desire.
Okay. Greg Ewell with the Metropolitan Area Planning Agency. Thank you, Commissioners. We have presented in the past on the vision. I believe you've had time to review the documents and the vision that's presented. We really think it's important as we grow in the future and as we plan that we are working together regionally. I think that's going to be important, that we are thinking strategically across jurisdictional boundaries and trying to work in a collaborative fashion such as Heartland 2050. We think that that will help us reduce inefficiencies and redundancies, help us to maximize our potential as a metropolitan area. We understand that there are some concerns from some members of the public, and as Commissioner Morgensen said, we've been having conversations and had a meeting particularly yesterday in Commissioner Morgan's office. And some of those concerns have been listened to. You know, one of the things we've included in this is an opt-out clause. So if the Heartland 2050 gets off the tracks in the view of the Douglas County Board, you can simply submit a letter and disassociate yourself from the Heartland 2050 compact. So there's some good ideas, and recognize that so we'll continue to probably have some good ideas come. But one of the issues that was brought up is this going to entangle us in a bunch of strings for federal funds, and we said no. What you do is you make a decision on each time a project comes along, whether or not you want to go for a grant opportunity, and if you evaluate at that point in time if the strings are worth it, because obviously federal grant opportunities oftentimes carry some of those strings. But that's not this initiative. This is Heartland 2050. This is the overall vision which you want to work for. If there's something that comes out of Heartland 2050 that you oppose, then at that point you would say, no, we don't want to do that. But this project does make us more competitive for federal funds. Going through this process shows that this area is working together. And that's something that's attractive not only to federal agencies but also to philanthropies. It shows that we're working together around a common vision and trying to move forward toward that. The bottom line is this is not creating another regional government in any way, shape, or form. This entity would not have any taxing authority or bonding authority. This is simply a forum for people to work together around these big picture goals and visions going forward in the future. So obviously we think it's very important that Douglas County, as the largest county in the metro area, is a part of this regional vision. It really doesn't make sense for us to be working regionally if Douglas County is not a part of it. So we hope that you will support this, and we'll be working to make sure there's strong Douglas County representation in all the committees in every aspect of this project, so that the goals and the projects that move forward are in line with the views and the goals of the county board. At the end of the day, I think that to meet our challenges in the future, where it's going to be important that we're working together, and that's not only working across jurisdictional boundaries, but working across public-private sector. And I think this is a collaborative opportunity that can have some real value in trying to move the region forward and get some out-of-the-box ideas. And again, every single idea we may not agree with, but again, around these big picture goals, that's what we're going to be working on. It's really an opportunity for people to come a couple times a year or quarterly and basically say, are we keeping on track? We've identified here are big challenges, here are big goals that we want to work on, and come back together and say, are we continuing to chip away at this and stay on target? And so that's really the goal of this. I shared at our rollout party last fall that we had a daughter last October, and so her name also happens to be Claire, and so little Claire will be 36 in 2050. And so just to think about that this little baby is going to be 36, and the goal of this really is to maximize our potential as a metro area. I want my daughter, our children, our grandchildren to be able to have the opportunities available to them so that they feel like they can stay in this area. There's opportunities here if they choose to stay, and then maybe I'll even be able to get to visit some grandchildren in this area in 2050. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Commissioner Boyle?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. The first one is, when votes are taken, if votes are taken, I assume they are at MAPA, I went to one or two meetings, and I rely on Commissioner Duda to tell on you, no, to report back to you. But I'm not interested, or nor do I support delegating my vote to another body for projects. So how do we continue to have a direct involvement other than attending your meetings and that sort of thing, and being on committees, which I'm sorry, I still have a law practice and I can't do that very well. But how do we ensure that we have control of what's, or have a say in what's going on at MAPA? I mean, what is the mechanism to make sure we have the say in these projects that affect Douglas County and directly?
Okay. Well, there's two different groups. One is the MAPA board, if I urge you, and so Douglas County has representation, right. Actually 2 votes, although only 1 attendee, but 2 votes. And the Douglas County Chief Administrative Officer has served as our Secretary Treasurer, so Douglas County is very much involved in MAPA and in our board structure and represented there. The Heartland 2050 group, again, this would be a non-binding, non-authoritative group working together, and as there's a nominating committee being led by Mayor Doug Kindig, Mayor of La Vista, and we've talked about in there having representation from every single county, and Douglas County, I assure you, will have much more than 1 representative on that. And so we will make sure that as we receive the applications, that application period is through April. If by the end of April we haven't received a member, somebody from Douglas County to be a part of that, then we'll go out and solicit somebody to make sure that we are, in sync with what the county is doing.
Well, let me give you a specific example and see if I'm off the rails. Several years ago, my recollection is MAPA made a presentation, told us that just over 50% of the people surveyed wanted a big ring of concrete running over to, good grief, I don't know, the east side of Pottawatomie County, going up to, a huge interstate kind of system just imposed on, you know, Douglas County's here and Sarpy County's here, and then this great big concrete thing is around us to come in and all this, sort of a pave the world theory, and which I am opposed to. I mean, I think we need reasonably good roads, but you know, whether or not we need another 4 lanes or 8 lanes around us, I don't think we do. And I think it encourages urban further sprawl and so forth. That's my opinion. And it also said that just about almost half the people surveyed supported a really robust public transportation system. And I think what's going to happen is that the ring of concrete is going to move forward, but the public transportation is going to kind of fall off the table. And I think it's because I'm not sure there's really that many advocates for the public transportation. I think there are people who ride buses and believe in, you know, whatever it is, maybe climate change and so forth, and all those sort of people. I'm not sure that they're really tuned in to watching MAPA. So how is that balanced? I mean, how are you going to deliver on what that survey said?
Well, one of the things that we started in the past year is the Citizens Advisory Committee, and this is a group has a very diverse group of stakeholders, folks from Creighton University and former engineers, and so it's a great group of people, and that's another vehicle that we have in addition to the board and the Transportation Technical Committee to give input and kind of raise some of those flags and say, are you getting off base or not? But as far as Heartland 2050 goes, at the end of the day, any recommendation that Heartland 2050 were to make, it would come back to the county, to the city, and say, you would vote on, if it were something that involved a city or county, you'd say, we would vote on that project or on that initiative. It's not like Heartland 2050 is going to have any power to make specific decisions. It's a collaborative group to work together on a vision.
Well, what I'm concerned about is, and then I'll let it go, but the recommendations will come back to us, and it's kind of like when you're raising kids, and they want sugar-coated breakfast cereal that, you know, 4,000 calories in a spoonful, and the sugar that will keep them going for a couple of days. And so what a parent should do is buy Cheerios and Wheaties or something like that and say, which do you want, Cheerios or Wheaties? Well, that's what I feel like is going to happen with the recommendation. We want the sugar-coated. We want the sugar-coated, and you're not going to recommend it. So your recommendations, you know, we have a choice between 2 things or 3 things that you recommend, or 1 thing, and I know we can participate in building those recommendations, but that's what I'm concerned about, that we're going to be getting recommendations that are pretty much decided that either we up or down, you know, are we going to build the ring of concrete or no, and here's why we must. So that's my concern, and I don't know how we get over it, but that's
well,
where
I appreciate your concern, and I think this whole thing has been based on public involvement and trying to get as much input as we can, and we're going to continue to, we'll be committed to continue to make sure this Heartland 2050 continues to be about that.
One last question. How do you work with some of the opponents who are in the room?
Well, for instance, we had a meeting yesterday, and one of the things we talked about is continuing to have conversations. So I think there's some good ideas, the opt-out clause being one of them, and so we're going to continue to listen to them and try and take into account their input.
Okay. I hope you do. I don't necessarily agree with everything, but I do agree with, first of all, their being here and watching and speaking up. I admire them for that.
Yes.
Secondly, they're the ones who did suggest this opt-out, which you're right. So there are good suggestions that come from listening to people who are not your supporters, and I'm glad that you are. Thank you.
Commissioner Morgan.
Mike, yesterday, Greg, and I want to compliment him. We had a meeting in Mary Ann's office probably 10 days ago or thereabouts and had a good discussion, and then I requested that maybe with Commissioner Borgeson that we have a future meeting with Doug and some other members of the audience that have attended our board meetings and had concerns, and we did have over an hour yesterday, and I appreciate your comments and questions, and we had the mayor of La Vista there. So I think it seems like it's probably on the right track. They do not have taxing authority. They're going to be coming back to us to have further discussion, and I think this hopefully is, as we understand it, just a draft. We'll continue to get input, work together, and I think this board can vote it up or down as they continue on. And I think some of your comments are good, that hey, either you go this way or not, where we have those options and talk about it. And I think we should have those early on. I know Commissioner Boyle always likes that we have earlier discussions of where you're headed, and if you think from time to time you ought to come to this board and talk to us about it or meet with several of us independently, we're open to having those kinds of discussions so that we are included in the process. And that's just my own opinion, and others may have a difference, and I respect that.
Okay, thank you. We definitely intend to continue to keep those lines of conversation open.
And I'm not going to ask Doug or Jeff or anyone else if they want to say something. That's up to them. But I thank them for participating yesterday also.
One of the things that I think might help address Commissioner Boyle's issue is if we agree that on a quarterly basis, or twice a year, you just come back and give a update about where we are with the process, so it kind of keeps us in the loop.
I think quarterly would be terrific.
Okay.
That's a great idea.
Just, and it's done public, and that way it stays out there and fresh in our minds. And okay.
Perfect. That's good.
Is there anyone else wishing to address the board on this issue?
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Doug Kagan. I represent Nebraska Taxpayers for Freedom. And I want to thank Greg for meeting with us, our group, yesterday. Our objection to this Heartland 2050 and the county participating in it is we know that the intentions are okay, but what we object to really is the template upon which Heartland 2050 is based, because we still believe that it's based on Agenda 21 precepts, the UN precepts. And we would prefer to see an opt-in clause instead of an opt-out clause. As an alternative, we would suggest just using interlocal agreements as a template. And just to cite a few of our objections to this Heartland 2050 template, we think that it will overlap existing government subdivisions. It'll override local governments in decision-making, like in planning, and it'll compete with private developers, infringing on their prerogatives. It will change the zoning process to make housing more expensive, pushing people closer together. Transportation dictates also. It presents a hostile climate for vehicle traffic. It's very restrictive on private property rights. It's basically just closer and more restrictive control on the citizens overall. We believe it would lead to higher taxes and fees and more government regulations. So again, our suggested alternative is just to use interlocal agreements as a template to work with other counties. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug.
My name is Mike Fagan. I'm also with the Nebraska Taxpayers for Freedom. Please note I'm not dressed in black today, Commissioners. I have a little different cladding on because I'm hoping that what we're going to end up here is having a very open discussion on this proposition. I heard a lot of we the people, the people are involved. I don't think the people are involved. I think it'd be great if there was some town hall meetings where we went through this same exact type of conversation and we invited the public to participate in it. And then I would further suggest that maybe what we look at is putting this out to a vote to the general public, because then it becomes we the people versus a committee versus a board versus that type of implementation. It was interesting to hear that there's an opt-out clause. I don't know about the rest of you. I haven't been very impressed with opt-out options at the government level, period. It just seems to perpetuate itself and continues on. So I don't think an opt-out is a real good thing. And public transportation, Doug and I sat this morning down at the West Roads, and 3 buses came in. 6 people got on 3 buses. This is not a mass transportation community. This is not San Francisco. This is not London. And folks, people don't like to ride mass transportation in this area. So I think mass transportation is not the answer to very many things. The last thing is that, again, says, well, we've solicited a lot of input. We've been to Creighton University. We've been to these type of people. They didn't come to me. I'm a taxpayer. I have to support this. I have to pay the bills. Why don't they come to me and ask me, hey, what do you think about this? They went to the university? Okay, great. I just personally don't think that this is a great way for this community to go. And the last thing really for me to say is federal. I mean, I'm not impressed with the way federal government is run. I'm impressed with the way my county is run. I'm impressed the way my city is run. But federal? Give me a break. I mean, tell me what they've done. It's a joke. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing Commissioner Kraft?
Greg, do you want to do any rebuttal or just?
Sure. First of all, we believe that by working together, being strategic, we can identify areas where we're reducing redundancy. So we believe that by working together, it's ultimately going to lead to saving taxpayer dollars, not increasing them. And then as far as the public participation, we did an enormous amount of public outreach to the public. And obviously, I wish that he would have heard the announcements, but the entire public was invited to a multitude of workshops, that were open to the entire public, and we tried our best to get out to multiple events, as I've shared with you all in the past, and that's detailed on page 13 of the vision document. In all, we touched nearly 4,000 people, and we also hired a research firm 2 different times, 2 different research firms to conduct professional surveys that were statistically valid, to double-check the input that we were getting and seeing is that reflective of the public at large. So an enormous amount of public effort went into public outreach, and it's always a challenge to get members of the public to come to something, and we also try to offer online opportunities and things of that nature. So I'm sure we could do better, and we'll always be able to do better, but we put forth about as much effort as I've ever seen on a project doing public outreach.
Okay. And I do recall reading at least 2 articles in the paper about it. Do you know how many there were?
I mean, there were several smaller articles. I think there were probably 2. When the project started, there was a large money section had a large write-up on it, and then at the final rollout, there was a large at the top of the fold in the middle.
And I also recall seeing it on Channel 6 announced for some meetings, and Channel 7. I don't know about 3. Right. I can't recall that one, but it may have, because I don't watch it.
It was on a KFAB and a number of radio stations as well.
Okay. And I heard the mention of an opt-in clause. I think that's what this is that we're voting on today, is we're opting in. Thank you.
I just wanted to comment to Mr. Fagan on the public. I was on the steering committee, and that is one part of the process that I was pretty impressed by, is the number of people that did come to the community forums that we had. But as Greg said, how do we continue to improve getting the word out about when those are taking place? And so whether it be you ask to be added to an email list, or we make sure that somehow or another this board knows a notice is going out and we help get those notices out. I just know on numerous boards that I sit on, when we do community stuff, it's really hard to get those notices out to the public, and we're always looking and trying to find ways to improve that. And so if you have a way of best getting to you so you have that information, let us know, and we'll definitely be willing to work with them on that, because again, that was one of the processes that I was impressed with, the number of people that did come out and listen and give input on where we were on stuff. So, thanks. No other questions or comments?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Please vote. And I just want to thank all of you for being here, and we will continue to work with you on this. Next is a public hearing for Class Y 111524 license for farm winery for Rainwood Vineyard, LLC, DBA Rainwood Vineyard, 9120 North 96, Omaha. The manager application is Gary Nachman at 9120 North 96. This is the public hearing. Is there anyone here wishing to speak for or against? Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Gary Nachman, representing Rainwood Vineyard LLC, doing business as Rainwood Vineyard. We are a small manufacturing vineyard. We grow our own grapes. We have apiaries. We make wines, meads, melomels, but we are small, and apparently we have the distinction of being the first winery in Douglas County. So I wanted to be here to answer any questions that any of you may have.
No questions. Congratulations on being the first.
Thank you.
Hope you have an open house tour when you come up.
Our intent really is not to be open to the public. It would be a little bit overwhelming, but at least at this point we won't be open to the public. It'll be private sales.
How big of an area?
We have, we're very small in the sense that we have about 1,200 vines at this point.
Wow.
We'll probably get up to around 7,000. You don't begin to be on the radar until you're about 15 or 20,000 vines. So, as I said, our specialty really is the handcrafted, unique Nebraska, taking pride in our local area that we can produce a wine that we think is pretty good.
Very good. Congratulations.
How soon now will it be available, in your opinion?
What time is it? No, obviously we have to go through the process of all the approvals. We want to make sure that we have our reporting systems in place. But we have wines, we've been producing wines for about 4 years. Not that we've sold any, we've just been practicing. But
I was fortunate enough last week with my wife to be in Napa Valley for a few days and visit some wineries. It happened to be my birthday, so that was where we decided to go. But, you know, it's an amazing industry, and have been there before. But I wish you much success. I think that's going to be great. The Nachmans, you didn't have a relative that was a dentist.
Ben Nachman,
yeah.
I would be very proud to have claimed him as a relative. He was not my relative, but he was a real gentleman.
Oh, he was. He lived across the street from me on 94th.
When I first moved to Omaha, I did know them. He had 3 daughters, and they wanted me to date one of the daughters so that they wouldn't have to change their name. That's my next to Omaha, next to the wines grown in Nebraska, Napa Valley is a great place to have grapes.
I agree. Very good.
Very cool. Anyone else wishing to speak? Hello.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good
I'm
morning.
Terry Teutsch. Mr. Nachman, I appreciate you greatly letting all the neighbors, even though you didn't have to, know that you were going to be planning on this. I guess I had a question for you. Are you planning on selling wine at your business?
Could you come back down to the microphone, please? And could you state your name again?
Terry Teutsch.
Teutsch.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned in the letter that I sent to all the neighbors, my intent is not to have a retail location. The last thing I want is people, strangers, coming to our neighborhood and thinking that it's a place
Well,
for
and
a
the
wine
reason
establishment.
I questioned that is because you're zoned agricultural and you'd need a special use permit, if I understand correctly, if he was going to be selling at the winery itself.
No, that's not correct. I can sell
Outside.
I can sell wholesale. I can have representatives, but I'm not selling retail.
To people coming. That's what I was
correct.
questioning. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Let us know, you know, just in case you're going to have something at another location ever where you are going to promote your wine, so we might
Absolutely.
learn more about it.
Thank you. We take great pride in representing Omaha and the state of Nebraska, wines in particular. We do understand that in order to have retail, we don't have the physical facility to support that, in answer to your question.
Right.
So we want to keep it at a level that is certainly legal.
Very good.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. What's the will of the board?
Second.
Please vote. We'll move to the committees, the first being Finance, Commissioners Morgan and Kavanaugh. The only thing on here is budget.
No, I'm not sure if we have an executive session today, Patrick? None?
No executive session.
So right after this meeting, I would say 20 minutes or thereabouts, we'll meet up in room 903 for our budget. Is that
okay?
So we've got some pretty challenging budgets, I think, today. Would that be accurate, Joe?
Yes.
So urge anyone to attend. Doug, you don't have to attend if you don't want to.
We have the County Attorney, Public Defender, Community Mental Health Center, and Douglas County Health Center budgets today.
Okay.
Okay.
Next is Community Services. There's one, a reallocation of the 2014-15 Visitors Improvement Fund Grant Award for Omaha Community Playhouse.
Yes, and Catherine, could you explain this to us, please?
Sure. Catherine Hall, County Administration. This is, excuse me, they contacted us to just make a slight change to their application. They denoted that part of the funding would be used for rights and royalties for Jesus Christ Superstar performance, and instead they'd like to reallocate that funding for the purposes of the Spamalot production.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve? Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Kathleen, there's a regular grant cycle for these applications, isn't there?
Correct. So this was they received an award last year in last year's award cycle. So this is just they're basically asking for formal permission to change the award as it was awarded to them slightly to redirect some of the funding for one purpose.
So we've already awarded them these funds.
Correct.
We're just allowing them to use it for something else.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Please vote.
There we go.
Next is the Human Resources, the first being the weekly personnel report from Civil Service as presented, if there are no questions or comments. Next is the weekly CAO report on staff assaults.
Nothing to report.
And next is legislative items. And then there's 3 legislative issues that we'll be talking about, which are basically the same ones that are in the report, so we'll just move to those. The first being a resolution opposing Legislative Bill 414, which is providing a property tax exemption for fraternal benefit societies. Did you want to say anything about that?
Yes. I'm looking for the resolution here. You'll see from the report that LB 414 has advanced to select file, and we have yet to take a position on this. Essentially, this is the Woodman of the World property tax exemption bill, and in viewing it in the context that we've looked at it, it runs kind of parallel to the appeal that I believe we currently have in Turk on essentially the same issue. So the idea would be that we would ask the legislature to allow the Turk matter to be resolved before making a final decision on LB 414. They could easily do this by simply laying LB 414 over. It will carry over automatically to the 2016 legislative session without any further action by the legislature. But this will allow our representatives in Lincoln to pursue that end. The bill heretofore has no expressed opposition either by the county board or by our representatives in NACO, who testified in a neutral capacity at the committee hearing. So without this action, the bill very probably would advance, and that would put it in competition with the Turk determination, which is expected later this year.
Commissioner Kraft?
Yes, one of the comments I read in the paper is that there wasn't pushback. That's not the way they phrased it, but that's the intent. That Douglas County, even though we voted to deny it, their option, and the law clearly states we could grant that option at our by voting for it here in our board. So the public and the county board needs to let our state senators know this is not good for the citizens of Omaha. There's something called corporate bluff, and that's what I believe this is, corporate bluff. You know, is Mutual going to spend, Woodman, excuse me, sorry, thank you very much. Is Woodman going to spend $16 to $25 million or more to build a new headquarters? Across the river, the jobs would stay in Omaha that are in Omaha currently. They might get tax benefits, but in general, it'll cost them more because they don't get deductions for interest since they are a nonprofit. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. So, yeah, it's a risk that I think is worth taking to deny them the tax exemption. And they are an insurance company. They're competing with every insurance company around. It gives them an additional unfair advantage in the competitive world of insurance. So I support you. I think we should have taken a stance, a firmer stance. We should have lobbied harder. We should have sent somebody down there. But we didn't. That's all.
Commissioner Boyle?
You know, part of this legislation does apparently will affect other fraternal organizations, and I'm concerned about the Knights of Columbus and some of the others. If we do this morning, I'd like to see us take a stance that protects those organizations, and you know, it's kind of a splitting of the hairs, I guess. And I am probably the only commissioner that has any feeling at all for Woodman's position. If you know, so many other states offer this, Minnesota, and in Minnesota there's the Lutheran Brotherhood that has full tax exemption, you know, and Woodman has that exemption from the Internal Revenue Service. And when people come down asking for greenbelt, you know, greenbelt protections on their property, one of the questions that we asked is, how does the IRS treat you? And they give their status, and that kind of is just about enough, all that I ever need to hear. So suddenly we have this company coming in. If it wasn't for that 30-story building across the street, I mean, if they were in Old Mill and had 10 buildings that were 1 story high, I don't know if they'd take the hit that they are. But it's so obvious. I mean, it's an icon in the Omaha skyline. And so I don't know. You know, to me, it's kind of a philosophy of, I won't mention names, but I had someone stop me who has a home in Fair Acres that was, and they appealed their valuation. And I heard it when we were doing those things and took the information and reduced the value of a mansion because I felt that it should be. And this person said that she was very impressed that I did that. And I said, well, I'll tell you the truth, just because you have a lot of money doesn't mean you shouldn't be treated fairly. Well, that's how I kind of feel about Woodman. I mean, they have the tax exemption from the Internal Revenue Service. This bill, I think, will spill over and affect other organizations that should be protected who do have that status. Plus, frankly, I think it was an overreach, and I don't know, I'm getting into my deposition, I guess, here, but I think it was overreach for the assessor's office to go out and take the exemption away from their lodge out in southwest Omaha. I think that was inappropriate. I just think we've been beating them up, and again, I think it's because of their profile. If they move to Council Bluffs, we really don't lose anything. I mean, I'm not afraid of that threat. I think it's kind of an insult to them, though, but if they did move, obviously they're not going to, I wouldn't think they're going to tear down the building, so they have to sell it. Somebody's going to move in and pay the taxes. I mean, we really don't lose. But I think, you know, in our race to compete with everybody, all of us have been involved in that in one way or another, and as a former mayor, I was really on the front line of that. We are always trying to figure out some way to, you know, entice a company to come, how to reduce the taxes for somebody who's here. But I think in the race to compete, these are the kind of incentives that are offered to other businesses. And I think it's a reasonable incentive. I mean, the jobs that are created certainly produce a lot of revenue, not necessarily for the property taxes, except in the homes and so forth they own. So I don't know, in the big picture, I have mixed emotions, and frankly, I lean a little bit toward Woodman. I think their case is a good one, and I think in our economic development policy, it may make good sense, because we may be able to lure the Lutheran Brotherhood from Minneapolis or wherever to come to Nebraska. I don't know. So I think there's two sides to it. I appreciate what you're saying, and, but I'm concerned also about the spillover, what this does to other organizations. It is far-reaching, and I think our position is pretty good right now. I think we ought to, I'm not sure how I'm going to vote, but I think we ought to be quiet about it. I don't think we should take a position on it.
Commissioner Morgan?
My feeling is, and it was a month or a couple months ago when this issue came up, to take a stand opposing that legislation, and I thought we should have at that time, and I still feel that way. So I'm appreciative that you brought this back and plan to vote for it. The statute's clear. We talked with the county attorney, read it at that time, and asked him to take another look at it at that time also. And that's where it should be, and I think we should not see this legislative bill passed, period. Not this year and not next year or the year after, you know. So that's my feeling.
Commissioner Duda?
Thank you. Boy, it scares me anytime I find myself agreeing with Commissioner Boyle on anything. Although you made reference, Commissioner Boyle, to our economic development policy, and we have no economic development policy. We don't do economic development. When I voted the way I did when Woodman came before us, it was not because I did not want them to get the exemption. It was because the county attorney advised us and made a compelling case to me that this is what the law said. That's all I was trying to do, was interpret the law, not trying to inject my own personal opinions on it. There's over $1 million of tax money on the table annually on this, and while only about 13% of it is the county's, it's a significant amount of change. But I don't want us getting into economic development. That always makes me nervous. That's not our role. That's for the city, that's for the chamber. This really is a decision that rests with the legislature, and by and large, I think you should only abstain if you have a conflict of interest, but I think I will be abstaining on this one simply because I'm not comfortable telling Woodman or the legislature whether or not they are deserving. That is somebody else's decision to make. Thank you.
Commissioner Boyle?
Yes, I appreciate your comments, Commissioner Duda, and don't be so frightened by agreeing with me. I'm sending you signals.
It's okay.
So if your phone blinks a couple times, that's me. No, when I used the phrase "race to compete," I was referring to the state. I know we don't do economic development, but you know, over the years we've heard governors of every faith speak about how we need to be more competitive and make the state more tax friendly to all sorts of businesses. And so I think this is in our race to compete. We have, when Caterpillar came to Nebraska. One of the things we gave away was, I understand now, I could be wrong, but I understand that part of the incentive was that when an employee gets their, on their payroll check, the taxes that normally would go into all sorts of other state funds was actually given directly to Caterpillar. There also is, of course, TIF that rings a bell, where we're constantly, these companies say, we're not going to build here but for this advantage, which is ridiculous. Look at the companies that have used TIF. So, I mean, that's another little problem I have in my head. Let's take that requirement out of the mix and just give them the money. But they use those incentives all the time. And so this is, to me, is just another tax incentive. And in the race to compete with Iowa, which is now beating us to death on this issue, Minnesota offers this incentive. So we do not offer this tax incentive to the sort of company that Women of the World is, but our neighboring states do. They do. And so this is what I mean by the race to compete. And this is not Douglas County, but this is the way it is in the states, the way the states compete. And I don't like to see it that way because it's just transferring jobs. It doesn't create jobs in a lot of cases. But that's what I meant.
I agree with Commissioner Morgan that what happened last time when this was up and we didn't, they interpreted it on the floor as that we were supporting. Now we've changed our minds, and I let you all know that I did make sure that Sean knew that wasn't correct, but we didn't want to be a in-your-face kind of thing because we had already taken the vote to not give it to them. But as this thing has moved on through the process, it is very apparent that they do need to hear from us. So I'm glad you're changing to bring it back because you're down there, you hear it. I mean, the last conversation that they were having, which was interesting to me, was they were talking about how this is property tax relief. And so I'm saying property tax relief, not property tax relief. And so it's getting very muddled, very, well, it's just moving through, and I'm very happy that it's back here for us to take a position on because I think it's very important that we do at this point. Commissioner Morgan?
I was going to do something else. In the Wall Street Journal in the last week, 2 weeks, the federal government has said they're going to take a stronger look, the IRS, at tax exemptions nationally. You have governors right now with proposals, and I'll try to get out an email, and that also is Wall Street Journal. And I'm not saying that the Wall Street Journal has it all right. They're just reporting, I think, in an accurate way on some of these items. But some governors are starting to take positions on medical, hospitals, and some of those kinds of things. And you've heard me say it before, I think we need to be taking a look at it. And I hope the schools, the city, will start to be with us to look at it too, because we're the small part of that. We're what, 12.5%, 12.8%, whatever it is, of the tax bill. But again, if you're trying to get tax relief, that's where it's going to come from. And what they're doing is taking and buying medical practices, moving them into a building they buy, and that's a situation. So That's all. I'll try to get an email out to you with the article about the governor in the next 4 or 5 days to all the commissioners, also just to look at, to see where that goes, and to our staff. Patrick knows I've talked to him plenty about this.
Okay, was there a motion made?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Any other questions or comments? Doug?
Doug Kagan, Nebraska Taxpayers for Freedom. We would urge the board to oppose LB 414. We think there's enough cumulative perks now with, as Commissioner Morgan said, the TIFs, there's tax credits. We would rather see the state lower the corporate tax rate for all the businesses. According to the statistics we just received from the county, if the exemption is given to the woodmen, we're going to lose over $1 million in property tax revenue. And what we're afraid is that if this bill passes, there's going to be broad exemptions for all these other fraternal and benefit organizations, and that's just going to erode the tax base further. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Any other questions or comments?
I see the assessor's office. Do they have any wanting to comment? I'm not asking you to, but I just thought in case. I see.
Mike Goodwillie, Douglas County Assessor's Office. Just a couple of items. First, based on last year's value and tax rate, if you assume that passage of the bill would mean a partial exemption for the Woodman Tower and pretty much full exemption for the other properties, yeah, you're looking at about $1 million worth of a tax hit to the tune 58 to 60 or so % for the schools. I think it's 22 or 23 for the city and 12 or 13% for the county. In terms of other organizations, understand fraternal benefit societies are specifically covered by 501c8 of the Internal Revenue Code. And among the requirements for C8s is that they be organized for a fraternal purpose, they operate under the lodge system, and that they pay benefits, sick, accidental, life, or other benefits to their members or beneficiaries. That's a fairly small group. Other fraternals are under C10, fraternal organizations with lodges, but they do not provide benefits. And the bulk of the entities that we would characterize as fraternals, your Elks, your Moose, your Loyal Order of Raccoons, your Water Buffalo Lodges, those are C10s. And so they are not covered by 44-1095, which is the primary change that's being operated in 414. So I don't think that the floodgates are necessarily going to open to all these other entities that are busy selling insurance. I took a look at the insurance, Department of Insurance website. There are about 30 or so fraternal benefit societies licensed to sell insurance in Nebraska. I think all but Woodman are headquartered elsewhere. In our records, I know Thrivent, which is what AAL became, has some personal property here in Douglas County on which they are paying taxes, but otherwise there's not a lot. The most important thing to me about this bill is what it does to 44-1095. That is the section that deals specifically with fraternal benefit societies and their potential tax liability as it currently stands. The law says every society organized or licensed under these sections shall be a charitable and benevolent institution, and all of its funds and property shall be exempt from all and every state, county, district, municipal, and school tax, other than taxes on real estate and office equipment. And that was the heart of the county attorney's opinion, is that you have a specific statute that deals with the property taxation of these particular corporate animals. Okay? The concern, I guess, I would have, and the main benefit that they're getting here is exemption from the insurance premium tax. The main concern I'd have with the new legislation is it will now read
every society organized or licensed under sections 441072 to 4410,109 shall be a charitable and benevolent institution, and all of its funds and property shall be exempt from all and every state, county, district, municipal, and school tax, period. I'm not sure it doesn't just completely exempt everything a fraternal benefit society owns, whether they're leasing it out to, Barrett Home Law Firm or an accounting firm or anybody like that. I'm not sure if this passes in this form you even get to 77202, which is sort of the omnibus exemption statute. Opinions may vary, but I think not only will there be a tax hit, but I think, as currently written, the bill is perhaps a bit broader than Senator Har represented on the floor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Boyle?
Yes, Mike, I'm going to ask you, is it your understanding that the Knights of Columbus would be dragged into this, or already is?
Oh, sure. They're licensed in Nebraska as a fraternal benefit society, absolutely.
So their fate would be the same as Women of the World?
Sure.
That's what we're talking about. What other organizations, such as the Knights of Columbus, would be thrown in with this bill? Do you know?
There's a list that I've got from the insurance department website who are licensed. There were some Catholic insurance selling organizations in addition to the Knights of Columbus. Thrivent Financial is the one that I can think of. That's what AAL became. They had
what is the name again?
Thrivent.
Thrivent. And who are they?
They are the new incarnation of Aid Association for Lutherans, AAL.
Okay, so the Lutherans get caught too?
They're already paying taxes on their personal property.
Well, how about property?
They don't own any real here in Douglas County.
Okay. Do they pay taxes on personal property where they're incorporated, their home corporation?
I don't know if they do or not. This particular statute regarding fraternal benefit societies is in a number of states. I don't have a ready list, but at one time I may have looked at what some other states were doing. And this is fairly typical of the regulatory scheme in quite a number of jurisdictions.
What we're doing is?
Well, this particular statute, 441095, that was the basis for the denial of the exemption, sure.
That's pretty widespread?
I think it is, yeah.
Well, I wonder whether, I'm probably saying this wrong, but the Trident?
Trident.
Whatever it is. Their home base is Minnesota, I assume, or not?
I don't know.
Well, I'd like to find out, and I'd like to know whether or not they're paying personal property taxes. I mean, I think, I know that I used the phrase race to compete, and that would raise a couple flags. But I mean, if we're really, we give away money all the time to corporations, left and right. And, and TIF is a classic example. I mean, I don't know how many millions and millions of dollars of property taxes we have wrapped up in there. Far exceeds what Women of the World's talking about, and yet we go after them. And I think frankly, it's because they're such a tall target. If they were out in Old Mill, I don't know that they would be getting this kind of. But I mean, they look at the building. You got that and the First National Bank, and that's the skyline basically. So I just think I have mixed emotions about it. But when I'm pushed into a corner, I'm afraid I'm going to have to support them. I was kind of keeping my mouth closed most of the time, but I just have mixed emotions, and I don't see that it's a big deal. I mean, they have it from IRS and all the rest. I'm not going to go over it again, but I appreciate what you say, but I don't think we should be catching the Knights of Columbus and the Lutherans and everybody else in this net, and the Catholics and all those other folks. I just don't think that's right. I mean, I think that if their mission, if they have tax exemptions, we should not be taking it away because of this. I just don't think we should.
Thank you, Commissioner Paul. No other lights,
Thanks,
questions,
Mike.
or comments? Sure. There was a motion and a second. Please vote. And this is to oppose 414.
Yes.
Okay.
I'd like you to put me down as pass. I don't want to vote yes, I don't want to vote no, and I don't want to abstain. Did you understand?
Thank you. Next is a resolution supporting Legislative Bill 623 to provide the issuance of motor vehicle operator licenses and state ID cards to persons with lawful status. Did you want to say anything on this one?
Yes, thank you. This bill has to do with the issuance of driver's licenses to what are termed the Dreamers. The purpose behind our resolution is that we recognize that these people are lawfully here, and many, if not most, are working, and like all of us, drive to and from work. This allows them to be legally operating a motor vehicle with a Nebraska driver's license, and all of that entails good things like insurance in case of an accident. It also allows them to be legally operating a motor vehicle in case they are, for any reason, involved in a traffic stop, and would not therefore automatically be cited for operating a motor vehicle without a driver's license, and in many cases incarcerated in our Douglas County Correctional Center at cost to us, uncompensated costs to us. Currently that does occur, and I think in this afternoon's Finance Committee meeting you'll hear testimony from Public Defender Tom Riley giving us kind of some scenarios on how that currently occurs. And although driving without a driver's license is a minor infraction, if you have a person who has uncertain status in this country, they can be incarcerated for even a minor infraction, and then it plays out as a immigration matter, but they stay incarcerated at our expense in our correctional facility. So this would allow these law-abiding residents to secure a valid driver's license, consequently be able to secure automobile insurance, and to avoid being caught up in the legal process. It would also allow us not to be caught up financially in housing them in our correctional center until that legal process plays out. So I'd urge you to support this legislation. It has broad bipartisan support in the legislature.
Commissioner Boyle.
Well, I want to thank Mr. Kavanaugh for putting this on the agenda. I think it's very important, and it's a matter of fairness. And I won't go into any further detail. I did have the opportunity, though, to speak with State Senator John McAllister over the weekend and thanked him and congratulated him for making this his priority. And oddly enough, the next thing he said was that he really admired Senator Nordquist for bringing this up. So really interesting bipartisan support. And, of course, our Mayor Stothard supports it as well. So it does have wide support. And I think it's probably the reason is that it's the right thing to do. And I thoroughly agree with that. And thank you, Commissioner Kavanaugh, for bringing this up.
Commissioner Kraft.
Talking about the expense, Commissioner Kavanaugh, do we provide a public defender to the person who's charged with driving without a license?
Technically, I suppose that we do. In this scenario, that's probably not the real problem. Normally, you would not be jailed for driving without a license. But if you are an individual who may have immigration status implications to your position, you can be for any infraction.
So that public representation costs us and our taxpayers also.
That is correct.
That's where I was going with that. Thank you.
And, as Commissioner Boyle pointed out, we've got, broad bipartisan support. Senator Nordquist and Senator McAllister, who, come from kind of opposite ends, both to be commended, to see that there's a community of interests here that transcends partisan considerations. And for Douglas County, that community of interest is very specifically our financial interest.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Doug.
Doug Kagan, again, Nebraska Taxpayers for Freedom. Our organization has come out in opposition to LB 623, and I just want to mention a few things you might not be aware of. The amnesty for the Dreamers is being challenged in the federal court, and if the presidential amnesty is overturned, then what we're going to find is the DMV in Lincoln is going to have wasted a lot of money processing these driver's licenses. Also, the DMV workers are not trained well enough, we believe, to differentiate between valid documentation and phony documentation presented to the DMV employees when these DACA people seek to get their driver's licenses. In fact, we've investigated what's happened in other states, and there's actually criminal syndicates that have operated in Pennsylvania and other states, whereby they send people into Nebraska who are not even Nebraska residents, but they provide them with phony documentation in order to get valid Nebraska driver's licenses, and then they go back to their home states and get home state valid documentation to appear as their legal citizens. Also, we want you to know that the governor opposes LB 623, and there are a number of conservative state senators and conservative groups like ours who oppose LB 623 simply because we believe that if the federal courts overturn this presidential amnesty, this is all going to be a wasted effort and expense for the DMV in Lincoln. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Commissioner Boyle?
I only wanted to comment that, excuse me, my family on my father's side, I'm almost certain they were all of them were shipped over from Ireland on famine boats back in the 1850s, and the English decided and found out that it was cheaper to send them to Canada, Savannah, and New Orleans than New York, and so my family was sent to Canada. All of them. I mean, it's amazing. You look at my background, and the Carries, the Ryans, the Carahers, I mean, the whole slew of them were on different boats, and they all were shoved off. And so they ended up in Canada with no papers, of course. And what brought them to Nebraska was a sign, and they moved into Lewiston, New York, but there was a sign in Canada that said free land in Nebraska. And so they crossed the border. So I'm really a dreamer because I don't have any documentation either. Quite a long time ago. So I think if we all look into our backgrounds, a lot of us entered this country with no documentation. And so I'm really kind of awfully glad that my great-grandparents came to the United States. It's unfortunate how they traveled, but they survived. My mother, on the other hand, her family, the Ryans, were picked up by a priest in Ireland, and 4,000 of them were brought to northeastern Iowa, Dubuque, a heavily Catholic area now and very Irish. I looked up my grandfather there, and there were, in Jackson County, there were 47 Thomas F. Ryans. So anyway, 4,000 of them, and he brought them. I don't know whether that priest got them all papers either. So we're really all undocumented. This is just a question of fairness. So I'm a big supporter of this, always have been. So sorry I had to spew that out, but I really think my heritage is probably not very clear either.
Thank you. Hello.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Good morning. My name is Emiliano Lerda. I'm the Executive Director of Justice for Our Neighbors of Nebraska. And Commissioner Boyle, my wife, is actually from the Dubuque area, Catholic Irish background, and so I know exactly the area you were referencing to. This is an issue about safety. This is an issue about economic opportunity. This is an issue that affects our future. This is an issue that affects a group of people that have been given permission to be in this country by the federal government and have also been given an employment authorization document to work. Nebraska is the only state in the country that does not grant them a driver's license. I'm speaking today to express my support for a resolution encouraging the passage of LB 623 by the Nebraska State Senate. The purpose of LB 623 is to reaffirm the legislative intent of Nebraska revised statute 60 to implement the standards laid out in the Real ID Act, which, among other things, provides that recipients of deferred action are eligible to apply for a state-issued driver's license. Deferred action is granted in a variety of different situations. Nebraska currently issues driver's licenses to immigrants with any type of deferred action except those granted deferred action under DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Arizona's virtually identical policy has already been struck down as a violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution. The law is clear that the DMV's current practice is unconstitutional, and I believe it will eventually be enjoined. Additionally, the DMV's current practice is also bad policy. The young people targeted by this directive were brought into the U.S. as children. In fact, many were toddlers when they arrived. They have resided in the U.S. since before June 15th of 2007. They're in school or have graduated from high school or college. They have no serious criminal convictions and are not a threat to public safety. They're authorized by the federal regulations to work, having benefited from a Nebraska education and wishing to give back to their communities here in the heartland. They would like to remain in Nebraska. However, the current policy sends a clear message to them, a message that they're not welcome here. Economists have estimated that nationally, over their lifetime, recipients of DACA will produce an estimated $1.6 billion in increased tax revenue. Nebraska can continue with a policy that sends these children and their tax revenues to neighboring states, or we can invite them to stay here. These youth deserve to be treated fairly. We ask that you do the right thing and pass a resolution in support of LB 623. And I also like to comment that the current procedures of the DMV is not to check, and their responsibility is not to check for the validity of documents. That's the federal government's job. And all the DMV is doing right now is, with an employment authorization card, is checking that through a SAFE system to see if there is a C33 code that comes back to them. And only people with a C33 code that comes back from the SAFE system are actually denied a driver's license. And as I mentioned in my statement, a lot of other people that had deferred action for humanitarian reasons are given a driver's license currently. And it's only this specific group of youth that actually are benefited under the DACA program that receive a C33 code back from the federal government system called SAFE that actually gives the DMV the reason to deny them a driver's license. And with that, I yield for questions.
Commissioner Kraft?
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. One of the things I do in analyzing the situation is play what if. What if I had parked on the street and I come out, I find my car has been swiped. My own insurance has to pay for it if it's enough that I want to file a claim. Now, what if I'm a driver who does not have a driver's license, and I am one of the dreamers, and I'm the one who accidentally side-swiped that car? Am I likely to stop if I don't have a driver's license and risk everything in my future for the mere fact that I don't have a driver's license? Most, in my opinion, most younger people would drive on. But if they had a driver's license and insurance, they're more likely to leave the note on the car and say, hey, I don't know who you are, I'm sorry I hit you, but here's my information. The other thing is somebody's in an accident and is injured. With a driver's license, we know who they are, we can contact proper authorities, we can contact their parents and relatives, they can get serviced in the hospital and find out if they have any allergic reaction to whatever they might be given. Is there any error in my what-ifs that you can see?
No, in fact, the current executive director of the National Safety Council of Nebraska testified in support of LB 623 at the state capitol, and a lot of her points during her remarks were very much on point with what you were saying. We want more people that are licensed, that go through the requirements to be licensed so that they can learn about safety precautions, and then also people that are insured. And so there is a lot of support from the insurance industry, obviously from the National Safety Council. This is a safety issue. This is an economic opportunity issue.
Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Mr. Lerda, your organization, Justice for Our Neighbors, is the largest immigration legal services entity in Nebraska. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you represent a lot of people who would be affected by this legislation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Currently, if someone is in this status and is ticketed for driving without a driver's license, what are the secondary immigration ramifications to being cited for that or any other violation of statutes?
As they told me in law school, it depends, Commissioner Kavanaugh, right? So it depends on law enforcement and what the situation, the specific situation may dictate. There might be situations, right, where the identity of the individual is not something that they can ascertain, and therefore they need to bring the individual back to their detention center to ascertain their identity through biometrics. And so if they do that, there is a possibility that the individual, for just a simple traffic violation, will end up in deportation proceedings. And to comment on the previous question of the public defender, a public defender could help an individual that doesn't have documents with criminal, perhaps, the criminal parts of their legal problem. But when it comes to the immigration legal issues, these are civil violations that are usually not charged with criminal violations, and therefore they do not have the right to a free attorney. The constitutional right to a free attorney does not attach for the immigration section of their legal issues.
So these folks, the portion of these folks who are incarcerated initially and then have to await an immigration disposition, they remain incarcerated for that period of time normally. Is that right? I will have to defer that to the jail, but in theory, yes, they could remain. Now, there was an issue where the ICE used to ask for a detainer, for the local jails to honor a detainer request for an additional 48 hours after they were entitled for release, and just to ascertain whether or not they needed to deport that individual. That is no longer being done. That practice was changed not too long ago by the Douglas County Jail. But the issue still is true that if there is somebody with an issue, with immigration issue, will be detained. Okay. And the waiting period for those hearings currently, on average, do you have an idea what that is?
No, I don't have an idea what that is.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak on this? I have listened to the debate on this, and I've been very impressed with Senator McAllister and how he's done his homework on this, and really has the best interest of the citizens at hand, taking this on as a priority. And so I will be supporting this as well. Commissioner Morgan? Oh, Commissioner, I'm sorry.
Oh, if
go
you're
ahead.
ready to.
No, go ahead. Oh, there is a motion?
Okay.
Commissioner Duda?
Thank you. I came in planning on sitting this one out, thinking not a county issue, but the argument about the financial implications of people sitting in our jail, it is a county issue, and therefore I'm ready to support it.
Great.
Thank you.
Please vote.
Claire, we agree again.
I know. That's a turn quick.
One more, Claire. One more, and then we can...
Common sense? Just
one more.
common sense?
The next one is a resolution supporting Legislative Bill 605 as amended by AM 1010 to change the classification of penalties, punishments, probation, and parole provisions and provisions relating to criminal records and restitution, and provide for special legislative committee. And in a nutshell, this is our prison reform bill that has come forward out of the study from the Council for State Government and their recommendations as to what should be changed. So, do you want to say?
Thank you. This bill is a work in progress, and this resolution has to deal with one of the amendments that's been offered to LB 605, Amendment 1010, which I believe we have been provided with by staff, which provides a formula for the county to recoup some of the costs that this bill may give rise to by the function of lowering penalties for certain offenses, which would have the result of putting folks who are convicted of those offenses in county jail rather than in the state penitentiary, therefore putting them as a financial responsibility of the county rather than the state. So in AM 1010, if you go to page 86 and you see lines 9 through 31 on that page and 1 through 21 on the following page, you get an idea of a process by which a fund is established and funds are provided to counties through this County Justice Reinvestment Grant Program to be used exclusively to assist counties in the event that their average daily jail population increases within 3 years after the effective date of this act. So what we are looking at in this bill is at least the potential to recoup costs that will be arising as a function of this act because of a change in sentencing guidelines. And I believe, Commissioner Borgeson, you've met with some senators on this, and maybe you could help us out with the current status of the bill.
Sure. We did meet, actually upon Commissioner Boyle's request that we sit down and let them know what our issues were, and Dr. Foxhall did a great job, as well as staff did, in terms of bringing up the issue. So we talked with Senator Mello, and he took a lot of those issues back to the Council for State Governments, and then we also met with Senator Christ, and one of the purposes is not only is he intimately involved as well, but he's going to be there a little bit longer. But what we did talk about in terms of that amendment was the language that it has currently is a little bit confusing, which we did point out to them, because it not only talks about your daily population, but it also has in there about the capacity. And we said we were very concerned, and Dr. Foxhall can come down at any time and interject on this, but what we were concerned about is that formula then is interpreted and used by the Crime Commission to determine what our payback, if any, is going to be. The other issue that we're concerned about is we're going to have to, which we don't have right now, very, very good data, and the senators emphasize this, is that we're going to have very good data to show the Crime Commission that our current population / capacity has changed, and we deserve this payback because of this legislation. And right now, we don't have any good way to collect that data. Senator Mello and Senator Christ did say they were going to talk about the formula and the wording of it. We haven't heard back yet if that was going to be changed. But it is of great concern because, as we explained to them, we've worked really hard over, especially the last 5 years, to reduce our population. So if they take our overall capacity and see that we have this excess capacity in our jail, they're going to say, well, you have capacity. And we're going to say, but, and again, it's up to their interpretation of how they're going to interpret that formula that they've put in this legislative bill. So we have had those discussions, took them to the table, they've heard us, and they too are trying very, very hard to address those issues. One of the main things that I think is good is in all legislation, as you know, they work on an issue, laws are passed, and then that's the end of it. This is actually a process, a 5-year process to be specific, as to moving forward in this overall oversight of the implementation of it. So right now, we've given them all the information of what our issues are. They are looking and addressing some of those as we speak. And
that's where we are.
So the resolution, the intent is, to continue to engage in this process to reach a consensus goal, as indicated by Commissioner Borgeson, that would allow us a clear and definable process by which we could recoup costs that are going to be generated by the function of the bill. Now, I know that Dr. Foxall has developed a fiscal note estimate of the impact of the current, of the impact of the new law on Douglas County, and this kind of gives us some idea of the scope of the problem that we're trying to fix. And all the resolution would do would be to instruct our legislative lobbyists to engage in that. They already have been to some extent, with the understanding that if we can fix this, then we would be supportive of the overall legislation, which I believe is moving forward. And so we want to actively engage for the balance of this legislative session in getting as clear a formula established to allow us to be at least held harmless for these increased costs. And Dr. Foxall, if you could come up for a second, we are looking at, and I believe you've distributed to the board your fiscal note estimate of the cost of LB 605 to Douglas County. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And just to kind of cut to the bottom line in your conclusions, could you give us the synopsis of what you feel the impact of this would be on Douglas County and the Douglas County Corrections budget?
Sure. I think that if this goes through as is, it's going to increase our population. It's going to increase it over time. I think I mentioned in my fiscal note that we could expect 50 plus in the first year, and that number will build after that as probation gets up to speed. And clearly they're going to have to hire more staff if they're going to supervise all of these individuals. As they hire more staff and as more individuals come onto probation, there will be more violations, and then my population will continue to increase. And the concern for me is, while I have capacity now, how long will I have that capacity? And I'll have to staff up to deal with the increased population. I'll also increase my medical costs, also increase my food costs, and then I'll have to make some decisions with respect to revenue issues as well. So that's a concern for me. And this is a work in progress, and I'm just concerned that this is going to increase our population. And I think I spoke to this in my executive summary too. We have to have space for spike-ups in our population as well. And if I run out of room for my population to spike, then I'm going to have to contract out for space. And it wasn't too very long ago, Commissioners, we were at 1310, 1320. And based on the way we classify minimum, medium, and maximum inmates, 1453, which is my capacity, doesn't mean I have all 1,453 beds available to everybody coming in the door. I've got to separate people pursuant to classification. And if my beds fill up with state probation folks, or the other piece of this is the other individuals being sent to the Department of Corrections to serve a year or less on a felony class 2A, 3A, 3, 4, that's likely to impact my population too, in addition to the threshold amounts that I spoke to in the fiscal note and my executive summary. All of that is going to have an impact on population, not just the potential for probation violators coming through. So I want to make that clear as well. So there's a number of different ways this bill is going to add to my population. Probation's one way, threshold amounts is another way. No minimums on the two new felonies, the 3A and the 2A is going to impact me as well.
So with the average increase, and this is conservative, of 50 inmates per day, that's $5,000 more or less per day increase to our budget, and a $1.7 million increase to our budget annually. I think it's pretty apparent that we have a vested interest in seeing that there is a formula that would allow us to recoup these costs from the state. And that's the intent of the the resolution, and I'd ask for your support.
I want to interject real fast just to ask a quick question about that fiscal note, because while the violators of their probation have a direct impact, that fiscal note does not include the increase in probation cost that we'll have with the addition. If right now the bill, Patrick brought this up at our meeting, the unfunded mandate bill, that probation costs are picked up by the state rather than by the counties. If that remains as is, where we pay for office space, we pay for equipment and what have you, that's going to add to our cost as well, as we saw with the juvenile probationers that were hired in place. So I just want to be clear that that cost isn't reflective of this fiscal note.
No, this just is as it applies to corrections.
Perfect. Okay. Commissioner Morgan, thank you.
Well, I guess I want to emulate Commissioner Boyle. The fact is that if they do reimburse us, okay, and Commissioner Boyle's been here when this has happened, we used to receive money from the state, and then slowly they withdrew that money, and I know you've wanted to get us to purchase some bands so we could take them to Freedom Park. That's one of my concerns. The second one might be that if we do get reimbursed, we could have a time, if I heard you correctly, Mark, that we don't have the facilities and would have to either contract out or build additional facilities at some point in time, which again would be a cost to the county.
That's correct.
So I want to be supportive of the idea, but I have a real reluctance because we've been told before, hey, you're going to get reimbursement, something changes, and amendments occur, and so on. That's where I'm coming from.
Commissioner Boyle?
I wonder whether, I wonder whether you and your professionals are in a better position to deal with people who have committed crimes, particularly those of other classifications that are not, felonies and so forth. But are you able to, when someone is sentenced to you, do you have any flexibility? I mean, I know you classify people, but do you have much flexibility?
We do, in terms of diverting people from secure custody to community corrections, house arrest, work release, day reporting center, even pretrial 24/7, things of that nature. So we have some flexibility in who we can place in secure custody and who we can place in community corrections. But those community corrections placements are also done in communication with the judiciary.
Okay, well, maybe this is just off the beam, so I think this is not on point, so I'm not going to pursue this further right now, much to Commissioner Duda's delight. Thank you.
This language wasn't there at all until we started pushing back. So
All right, go ahead. Commissioner Kavanaugh?
I appreciate the sentiments that Senator Morgan and Commissioner Morgan and Commissioner Boyle have expressed.
You can call me your eminence if you're okay.
I was thinking U.S. She said I was thinking step down. I said U.S.
In any event, and I really appreciate the institutional knowledge that you display of how things have played out in the past. I mean, it's essential for us to know that before we decide where we're going next. Where have you been is essential as where you're going. The problem we have is there's no perfect choice here. There's bad choices and less bad choices, and this amendment is less bad than the green copy of the original bill as it was introduced. And all we're saying to our legislative lobbyists is work on this to make it better if possible, because this bill is probably moving forward. And so had we not had any of the discussions that Commissioner Borgeson and others have engaged in, this language probably wouldn't even be on offer yet. But because we pushed back, this is kind of an initial draft of an idea that would address some of the concerns that you're talking about. So what we're anticipating with the resolution is just to green light our legislative lobbyists to work on this process between now and the end to get us the best language that we can. Probably not going to be perfect. It's going to be better than what was in the original bill, which was no compensation for us picking up these people.
Commissioner Morgan?
The part I'd want to say is, you know, and maybe it might be good if sometime during the week, even if it's at 7 in the morning with Sean before he's going down to the legislature for a few of us to talk about it, you know, and I hear what you're saying, that the other bill doesn't have reimbursement, it's likely to pass. You know, I don't know that that's for sure, but if it is, that's maybe some of us need to even consider going down to the legislature. And Commissioner Boyle, you may have some thoughts on this. That may be something with our chairperson to have us move toward Friday or next Monday or something, to be down there and talk about it to see if those chances are for real. Because I'm thinking it'd be better if we could just do away with the bill, period. And Mark, we'd want you along, believe me.
Teresa?
Thank you, Commissioner. Teresa, your County Attorney's Office. I had simply had my light on. I was going to speak briefly to the LB 605 as a whole, but I see that my boss is also now present. And I simply was going to offer a point of information, and that is that the Nebraska County Attorneys Association has opposed LB 605 as originally written and as amended.
And Senator Chris did bring that up, and his question, I guess, to us was, if you oppose, as these other groups oppose, then what do you propose? And we basically said, you can honestly take a look at what we've done over the last 5 years of bringing in those alternatives to incarceration, that we've built those programs, we've reduced our population based on those alternatives. And so if you look at what we've done, you can actually replicate what we've done, and actually done it on the state end rather than putting the individuals in back on us, shifting them back to us. So we did respond to that in terms, because he did bring that up and ask about that. There is, Patrick just handed me, or Marcos, I can't remember which one, floor discussion is today at 1:30. There's a new amendment, 30 pages, filed this morning, which I don't know, we haven't seen it yet, we haven't looked at it yet. You have looked at it?
I've looked at it, and it's probably more in the realm of county attorneys to speak to what the amendments. The amendment that I just saw about an hour, 45 minutes ago, really doesn't have a direct impact on what my fiscal note speaks to. It's more on sentencing and 1/3 time and minimum and maximums. So it's the amendment's more county attorney-ish, if you will.
And if I can go back for just a minute to Commissioner Kavanaugh, in the resolution is what I'm looking for, is if we want to show, as we've said, that we're here to sit at the table and work through this with you, if we change the language of our resolution to say something that we are supportive of the concept of reforming our correctional facilities and stand with you in working to resolve that, but we want to make sure that counties are made whole or kept whole, or counties are not paid. Yeah, I mean, somehow or another change that language of the resolution so that it's in there more specifically.
That needs to be clear.
Yeah, because right now the resolution is just saying we're supporting LB 605 as amended by LB 1010, and without any conversation about what our conversation has just been. So I can't support it as it sits today, knowing that there's $1.7 million potential increase in our county budget, even if it's over the next 5 years, without the explicit state language at the state level saying that we're going to be made whole. And the amendment doesn't do that as it's written today. It's too ambiguous. Commissioner Boyle?
You know, I've often felt that one of the problem is that you know, people are charged with crimes under state law, and so they become state prisoners. And of course, you know the story. They sit there and we pay for it. They don't. The state doesn't reimburse us. I wonder whether we shouldn't look at something kind of clean and simple, like maybe some kind of an intergovernmental agreement with the state of Nebraska that they would lease space from us at the Douglas County Correctional Facility, that under the direction of our very capable director, he would figure out which and how much should be leased to them, and let them and say, okay, we're going to lease this to you, and here's the price. If we got $30 a day, we'd be far ahead. I mean, maybe we got to try to do something simple and just lease them the space in our facility. Say, here's where the state prisoners are going to go, and this is what we have in mind. I wonder whether that, to some of these new senators, and Senator Christ is not new, but that might be a cleaner way and more appealing, because that gets us out from under all this complex of paying.
It'd be a big help.
I think it would, and of course the city is still out there doing things, but I think we ought to talk to the state about that and see what happens.
Commissioner Kavanaugh?
And I have no pride of authorship in the language of this resolution. It's the intent to give our legislative lobbyists in Lincoln the capacity to go and work this to the best interest of Douglas County. So, that said, and the fact that the bill is up at 1:30 this afternoon is a little time sensitive, if we wanted to add something to the resolution that indicates our ultimate goal, which is, as Commissioner Borgeson pointed out, pretty much a hold harmless position where we are compensated by the state for these folks who are coming in as a result of the operation of LB 605 to our correctional facility. And what words we put on this, like I said, I have no pride of authorship, but if we wanted to add something to the whereas it is in the best interest of Douglas County and its residents to support LB 605 as amended by AM 1010, or similar legislation that would hold Douglas County harmless, financially harmless, because of the operation of LB 605, I would be not a problem with that at all. It's just a matter of, we need to get something done probably this morning on this to have an impact.
Commissioner Morgan?
I was thinking if Mr. Klein would add something he's going to comment on, I'd like to listen. Always.
I'll be very brief. Don Klein, Douglas County Attorney. I heard your discussion, and I thought I would come down just to let you know that the Nebraska County Attorneys Association is opposed to 605 as written. It's not just about the money, although the money is an important factor. To reduce prison population, the legislation requires all sentences, as you're aware, less than a year to be served in county jails, not state prison. Property taxes can increase due to the increased financial cost to counties. There's a $250,000 county justice reinvestment grant program in AM 1010, the amendment, designed to provide grants to counties in order to offset the increased jail costs. However, it'll only last for 3 years after the law goes into effect, but the sentencing restructuring would affect counties much longer, and the amount is substantially insufficient to cover the increased cost to the counties. But it's not just about that. There's also many changes in this law with regard to the sentencing structure. We have been a part of attempting to work with them regarding prison reform. We think that's a good thing. However, this is more about sentencing reform. For instance, in the indeterminate sentencing part they want to pass that says on a Class 2 felony, which carries up to 50 years, the maximum sentence could only be 16 2/3 years. So the person will be eligible for parole in 8 years. For instance, Erica Jenkins just got sentenced to 40 to 50 years and 40 to 50 years for her role in the robbery and murder of those 2 Hispanic gentlemen in South Omaha. Well, she would have only been able to get, the maximum sentence she would have been able to get would be 16 2/3 years, and she'd be eligible for parole in 8 years. Under this, implementing this indeterminate sentencing under 605. It changes all the felony classifications for Class 3 felonies, which are now 1 to 20 years, to 4 years, 0 to 4 years. And I don't think that's the way to manage prison reform. There is a public safety issue here. And so we have done, as Commissioner Borgeson said, here in Douglas County, so much on the front end to prevent people from going to the penitentiary. We have one of the best drug courts in the Midwest. It's a model drug court. We have 150 people in there. We have a diversion program where we divert people from getting a felony conviction. We have a young adult court for the people who don't fit those criteria, so we can prevent young people from getting a felony if they meet some very strict criteria to get through that program. We have mental health diversion. So we are working very hard on the front end to prevent people from being sentenced to the penitentiary. The people that go, obviously, and the judge still has an option to give probation. So this is a concern that we have. I know that there's a press conference going on right now that they wanted me to be a part of at 11 o'clock down in Lincoln with the Nebraska County Attorneys Association, different elected county attorneys, and the Attorney General in opposition to 605 and 172, 173, because it's coming up for debate this afternoon. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. And I would hope that if you had any questions about anything from the criminal justice perspective, Mark has answered a lot of questions already. Dr. Foxall has, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about that at all. But there are concerns as it's written right now, and we're happy to work with anyone. But the way I get a little concerned because it reminds me of the juvenile bill from a year or two ago, where this massive bill got done because we needed to do some reform, and then all of a sudden, a year or two later, we're going back and trying to fix that, and maybe that we're jumping into things a little, making some changes that shouldn't be done yet, and there needs to be a better thought process before some of those changes are made. So that's a concern.
Commissioner Morgan.
Well, I thank you for your comments, and as always, and I wish you were down in Lincoln at 11 o'clock, even though you had to inform us.
As soon as I get done with our budget meeting, I'm supposed to be down there to...
Well, you could have skipped the budget, and we would have
that's okay.
Rescheduled. I mean, it's so important. My own feeling listening to you, and with all respect to Commissioner Kavanaugh, I'm opposed to 605, period. Now, I'm not as informed as you are, but listening to you, totally opposed to this. And more importantly, I've changed from the financial aspect. That's certainly a concern always. But what you've stated in these cases and the sentencing is just so detrimental to our society.
Well,
so that's where I am.
And like I said, after our budget finance meeting, I am going to go down to Lincoln. I've got a meeting with the governor also at 4:30 today, so we're going to talk about these issues too.
What's the harm in you doing the budget in a week or 2 weeks?
I'll still be able to get down this afturnoon, so I'll be all right.
I don't want you getting a ticket.
No.
I don't want to have to defend you.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine.
Because that'd be a disaster.
Commissioner.
Get a ticket, I'll defend you. I'll get you out if it takes 20 years.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Mr. Klein, thanks. Sure. We, PJ, I think will stand opposed to 605 in its introduced form. What we're probably not going to see is that introduced form being debated and advanced on the floor of the legislature. We're going to see something closer to this amended form, which is better, it's not perfect, and we'll never get to perfect. What we are trying to do is affect the outcome of something that looks like it's going forward that would make it better for us. So, our resolution certainly could reflect that we oppose LB 605 in its current form. But we support the idea of it holding us harmless in the event that it passes, holding us harmless from the cost that it's going to generate and impose upon us.
But what about, the maximum of 8.2 years or whatever? That's where I'm coming from. That even concerns me more than the financial impact.
I appreciate that, but, those are criminal law considerations that are Mr. Klein's responsibility. Ours are fiscal considerations that are our responsibility. I understand and hear what you're saying, that you have a comfort level or a discomfort level with changing those standards. But that's a result of the debate in Lincoln over prison overcrowding, if I'm right, that they feel, or some senators feel, the senators certainly behind 605 feel, that these adjustments in the sentencing guidelines will have the effect of alleviating some of the state prison overcrowding problems.
Yeah.
That's what's driving
If I could speak, that's, and Commissioner Cameron, I agree with you that it's hard to figure out when this morphing goes on with the bill, but we see that as part of the problem is that you don't solve the overcrowding problem by saying, well, we're going to get rid of mandatory minimums, we're going to give indeterminate sentencing now, we're going to lower everything just to, because the people I think that are getting sentenced in that capacity, and the judges have the discretion there, are the people that need to, it's a public safety issue, and that's the concern that we have. So it's difficult to know what to say when we don't exactly know how the bill's going to end up. It's changing, right. And so, like you've said, we're happy to work with people, and so as we will, but the way things are right now, we as the County Attorney Association, who I'm speaking of, and me personally, are saying, hey, we're opposed to this legislation.
And that's my point, is they are an association that's designed to address those issues specifically. We're charged with the county budget. And so what I'm trying to say is, if this thing's going forward, and it appears that it is, that we need to try to protect our budgetary exposure in the event that it passes.
But I think of myself, maybe wrongly or rightly, I feel like my first priority being a county commissioner is public safety. Now, I'm concerned about budgets, and I've demonstrated that. But the public safety is a bigger priority to me, and I'm listening to the county attorney, and I guess what I'd say is, hey, we'll take the vote, but what I would like to do is amend it that we're opposed to 605, period. And then let's work together, and I'd like your input, reminders to us of what we can continue to do together to make sure that our first priority of public safety is there.
And that's been our position. We're just saying, hey, well, because I don't know how you say, well, we could be okay with it, because we don't know what the amendments are going to be exactly, and by saying we're opposed, then maybe things could change the way that we want them to change.
I'm afraid if we go the other way, they'll put in their amendments, we may not get what we need to get concerning public safety where you're coming from.
But that's just, I just wanted to let you know where we're coming from on that. So.
I appreciate it.
Right.
Commissioner Boyle?
My feeling is, after listening to Mr. Klein, I think we ought to oppose the bill and be in lockstep with the Nebraska's county attorneys. I think that gives us, we don't have to, and things that we do here so many times, we sit here and finesse all these bills. We have no power to do that. I think it's better with the power of the County Attorneys Association that we simply say that we support the county attorney's position, we oppose this bill. End of comment. That's how I feel.
And then let them come to you or us and say, here's what we want to do.
Well, I think it'd be helpful if Don is able to say, the Douglas County Board is unanimously opposed to it.
Okay, Commissioner Kavanaugh?
I guess I'd have a question at that point to Commissioner Borgeson, who's been engaged for us in discussions with the senators on these budget questions. Where does that leave you? I mean, if you're going to try to make this language better, and we're saying we're opposed to the bill, where does that leave you in your discussions with Senator Mello and the other supporters of this bill?
Pretty much just where we've been is at the table working through it. And it was my understanding that there's going to be like 605 is not going to be 605 anymore. It's going to be 1010, I think, is the new amendment becomes the new bill, or everything's folded into that amendment. Is that how you understood it from Senator Mello? But now there's a new amendment, which, again, 30 pages, we haven't even had a chance to take a look at. I guess, in a nutshell, it just kind of leaves us at the table continually working through what they're putting out there in terms of what we can live or not live with.
Well, maybe, in order then not to jeopardize your negotiation position, that we don't pass a resolution today on this. We let you continue on to negotiate the best financial deal that we can get with Senator Mello and the other senators you're meeting with. You know, if I'm a senator and I'm looking at the Douglas County Board and I'm engaged in good faith negotiations with them, and the first thing they do is say, well, we're entirely opposed to your bill, you're probably going to end the negotiations pretty shortly after that. And I don't think, want to do that. So maybe by not passing a resolution today, and I agree with Senator Boyle, the resolution isn't the end-all and be-all.
Your Eminence.
It's not like a papal bull. But we allow ourselves some more latitude. And so sometimes the best thing to do is to do nothing. Currently, I think that might be the wisest course today. And so I'd entertain withdrawing this resolution at this time.
What we could craft is more of a formal letter that we can shoot down there this afternoon that outlines what our concerns are that we talked about. But then in the last paragraph, we can say, as we have, both to Senator Mello and Senator Crist, that we stand ready to continue to work on LB 605/10, Amendment 1010, as it moves forward. So we could do something like that. So again, that they are seeing that in good faith, we are bringing these issues forward that are real, and that we do want to work with them, continue to work with them to try to get it so that we can be in a position where we're held harmless, but yet it's good public policy. So we could try that.
I think that makes some sense.
Commissioner Morgan?
What I was going to do was see if Commissioner Kavanaugh would accept a friendly amendment to strongly oppose 605 in its present language. But I don't want to harm your negotiation, so if you think the way you're approaching it is better, but I'd like to be supportive of Don Klein and the attorneys, county attorneys across the state, of their position at this point. Then in a week or 2 weeks, if there's something going on, we can always change it, but I'll listen to you.
Why don't we wait 1 week just so we can see what this new amendment says, and bring it back next week? But in the meantime, if we really lay out our concerns so that they know it's in writing, it's everything we've talked about already, but it's there, and we send that down there, lickety-split this afternoon.
Okay. And I want to be sure, I think, is Don still there?
Yeah, Don's still there.
Keep us informed as much as possible.
Sure.
Have Therese or somebody, Patrick, get in touch with us so we know how things are going and what we can do to be helpful.
All right. I'd be happy
Okay.
to. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. With that, there are no other legislative items that we have currently, unless someone else has any. If not, we do not have need for an executive session, and so we will meet on the Finance Committee up in room 903 in about...
Well, hey, Don, are you okay if we don't meet up there till noon? Are you going to be all right? Or
Okay.
is that all right? And that way people have time to get
Yep.
some lunch or whatever they want to do?
Yep. Okay, so 12 o'clock will be in 903.
And Joe, me, we can do Don first.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Please vote.
It doesn't. Jay is so scared.
skies for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesty above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining